The Crusades. The Crusades were Christian military expeditions and religious wars proclaimed by the Pope. They were organized mainly to defend Christians and recover or defend territories that Christians believed belonged to them by right. The Crusades, waged by Western Europeans, took place from the late 1000s to the 1500s. The original goal of the Crusades was to gain and keep control of Palestine, also called the Holy Land. This region was important to Christians because it was where Jesus Christ had lived. Palestine lay along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and Muslims had taken control of it from Christians. In the First Crusade, Christians recaptured Palestine. During later Crusades, they fought to control Palestine or to recover parts of it that had already been lost to Muslim forces. According to the Church, crusading counted as an act of penance, that is, payment to God for sins committed. From the late 1000s to the late 1300s, the Crusades were a popular religious activity, attracting thousands of nobles, knights, peasants, and townspeople. Not all the Crusaders joined the expeditions for religious reasons. Some hoped to gain power, territory, and riches, but most survivors returned home with little material profit. Even after 1291, when Muslims regained control of the last Christian territory in Palestine, crusades continued in the eastern Mediterranean region. They also took place in such areas as the Iberian Peninsula, the land surrounding the Baltic Sea, Eastern Europe, and even within Western Europe itself. The Crusaders' enemies included Muslims and non-Christians, Greek and Russian Orthodox Christians, and even Roman Catholics, considered to be a political threat to the church. The word crusade comes from the Latin word crux, meaning cross. Members of the many expeditions sewed the symbol of the cross of Christ on their clothing. To take up the cross meant to become a crusader. How the Crusades began. During the AD 500s, the Byzantine Empire, a Christian empire centered in southeastern Europe, controlled much of the land bordering the Mediterranean Sea. This area included southeastern Europe, Asia Minor, which is now a part of Turkey, Palestine, Syria, Italy, and parts of Spain and North Africa. In the 600s, Arab Muslims conquered Palestine, including Jerusalem. Most of the new Arab rulers allowed Christians to visit the shrines in the Holy Land. Starting in the 900s, Christian pilgrimages from Western Europe to Palestine became increasingly common, and the attachment of Western Christians to a place they considered to be holy grew. Christians came to believe it was a disgrace that Muslims controlled the site of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. During the 1000s, the Seljuk Turks from Central Asia conquered much of the Middle East, including Palestine, Syria, and most of Asia Minor. The Seljuks, who were Muslim, crushed the Byzantines in the Battle of Manzikert in Asia Minor in 1071. In 1095, Byzantine Emperor Alexius I Comnenus asked Pope Urban II for assistance in fighting these Turks. Urban agreed to help. He wanted to defend Christianity against the Muslims and recover the holy places. In the autumn of 1095, Urban held a meeting of church leaders in Clermont, France. At this Council of Clermont, Urban called for a crusade. He gave a stirring sermon, urging European Christians to stop fighting among themselves and recapture the Holy Land from the Muslims. He promised the Crusaders both spiritual and material reward for their work. The crowd reportedly responded with shouts of "God wills it!" An intense desire to fight for Christianity gripped Western Europe, and thousands of people joined the cause. The First Crusade, from 1096 to 1099. Following Urban's call for a crusade, a preacher known as Peter the Hermit and a knight called Walter the Penniless led groups that rushed ahead of the official expedition. These crusaders made up the first of several untrained and undisciplined groups that became known as the Peasants' Crusade. They demanded free food and shelter as they traveled through Eastern Europe towards Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, Turkey. Stirred by an intense feeling against non-Christians, some groups in the Peasants' Crusade, and some later Crusaders, also killed many Jews. Because the members of the Peasants' Crusade often stole what they wanted, many were also killed by angry Europeans. Muslims killed most of the rest in Asia Minor. The main armies sent by Urban consisted chiefly of well-trained French and Norman knights. The key leaders included Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, Robert of Flanders, Robert of Normandy, Stephen of Blois, and Bohemond of Toronto. At Constantinople, Byzantine forces joined in the Crusaders. In 1097, the combined army took the city of Nicaea, which is now northwest Turkey. Then the army divided, and the Western Europeans marched towards Jerusalem, fighting many bloody battles along the way. The most difficult was the siege of Antioch in northern Syria. Many crusaders died there, some from hunger, others deserted. After Antioch was captured, discovered a lance said to be the one to thrust in the side of Jesus and the cross. Inspired by this discovery, the Crusaders won a great victory. The Europeans arrived at Jerusalem in the summer of 1099. They recovered the city after 6 weeks of fighting. So they finally get Jerusalem here. Then the Crusaders go home. The leaders who had stayed behind divided the land into 4 Crusader states: Edessa, Antioch, Tripoli, and Jerusalem. And the Second Crusade comes on in here. This is in the 1100s, from 1147 to 1149. In 1144, the Turks conquered Edessa. The threat to the other Crusader states brought the Second Crusade. So, the preachings of French religious leaders like Bernard of Clairvaux inspired Western Europeans to rise up again and defend the Crusader states from the Muslims. King Louis VIII VII of France and King Conrad of Germany led the armies to the Second Crusade. The armies didn't really cooperate, and the Muslim forces defeated them, so it was kind of an epic fail. The Third Crusade happens a little bit later. The Muslims continued to attack Christians in the Holy Land during this time. By 1183, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, had united the Muslim areas around the Crusader states. In 1187, Saladin defeated a Christian army at the Battle of the Horns of Hattin and triumphantly entered Jerusalem. Only the coastal cities of Tyre, Tripoli, and Antioch remained in Christian hands. So the Muslims get united. Stuff starts to happen. The loss of Jerusalem leads to the Third Crusade. The most important European leaders of the Third Crusade included Frederick I. If you are into medieval history at all, you've heard this name. King Richard the Lionhearted of England, and King Philip II of France. Frederick drowned on his way to the Holy Land. Quarrels among Richard, Philip, and other leaders limited this crusade success. The Europeans conquered the Palestinian port cities, but after the capture of Acre, Philip returned home. Richard tried to recapture Jerusalem, but he failed. And his recovery of the Palestinian coastline allowed Jerusalem to exist for yet another century. Before Richard went home, he negotiated a treaty with Saladin. As a result of this treaty, the Christians could officially now pilgrimage to Jerusalem and see where their Lord and Savior was born and passed away. However, more crusades, friends. The Fourth Crusade, crusading reached the height of its popularity in the 1200s. There hardly was a year during the century when the Crusaders were not fighting. The Fourth Crusade took place at the beginning of the 1200s and resulted because the Third Crusade didn't really recapture Jerusalem. The Crusaders became involved in the affairs of the Byzantines, and they did not reach their goal. Pope Innocent III is in power now, and he preceded many French nobles to take part in this crusade, which he thought should go to the Holy Land. But the Crusades' leaders attacked Egypt instead in order to split Muslim power. The Crusades bargained with traders from Venice to take them by ship to Egypt. Only a third of the expected number of Crusaders arrived in Venice, and they could not pay the costs of their ships. But the Venetians offered to transport the Crusaders if they helped attack a city in Croatia. Meanwhile, a refugee Greek prince named Alexius claimed that his father Isaac was the rightful Byzantine ruler. These Crusaders helped to agree to capture the Holy Land. In 1203, they camped outside Constantinople, and Alexius could not really fulfill his promises. In 1204, they captured Constantinople, and we'll pick up with the Children's Crusade in the second reading here.